Hey there! If you garden, you've probably heard about your zones. And today I am making you two videos about zones. This one is about your USDA zones, otherwise known as your plant hardiness zone or your growing zone. At the exact same time, I will be posting a video about your permaculture zones, and I'll link to that at the end of this one, alrighty? Let's jump into USDA zones and what those mean and how you use them. USDA zones, as the name implies, are used in the United States. United States Department of Agriculture growing zones or plant hardiness zones. So if you do not live in the United States, you can use the concepts from this, but the zones may not directly translate unless you're using a US zone chart and just figuring it out. But anyone should be able to find helpful information in this video. The first thing that you want to understand is that USDA zones don't tell you what you can grow in the spring or the summer or the fall. All these tell you is what low temperature will kill your plant. That's it. You don't need to worry about if you're growing, like, okay, I'm zone 8A. I had to think about that for a second. I'm zone 8A. I don't have to think about my moringa tree that was over there and is now gone because it's a zone 10 plant when I'm trying to grow it in the summertime. Doesn't matter. I can grow a zone 1 plant in the summertime. I can grow a zone 12 plant in the summertime. It's going to be fine because our zones only apply to the cold. So your zone is based on your annual average low temperature. Now remember that on More Prana Gardens channel, January is Observe and Interact month, so I'm going to ask you not to just trust your zone chart, but also to observe what happens in your area and on your land, because those are going to be much more significant to what you are growing, right? So on the mainland, at the very top of Minnesota, there's a little bit of zone 2. And at the very bottom of the Florida Keys, there's a little bit of zone 11. But mostly the mainland falls between zones 3 and 10. Like I said, I'm 8A, which implies that there's an 8B, and there is. So if you just think about it as the A's, the numbers, they go by tens. And then your B's are a half step warmer. This is going to come together. Zone 10, their average annual low temperature is going to be 30 degrees. So 10B would be 35, right? All right, so I am 8A. My annual average low temperature is going to be 10 degrees. Parts of the DFW Metroplex, specifically where it runs along the Trinity River and by White Rock Lake, are 8B. I noticed this on the zone map when I was researching for this video. So if you are in DFW, do not default to 8A. You might actually be 8B, but that's okay because that means your annual average low is 15, not 10. So you're a little bit on the safer side. When we look at our zones to decide things, it's going to be things like, I know if I put my moringa tree down into the ground, because I'm zone 8, which gets down to 10 degrees, and that's a zone 10 plant, which can only go down to 30 degrees. I know it's a lot of numbers all at once. That is not going to survive my winter. So we had a hard freeze. It got down to 18. All the branches on my moringa died. I cut them off. I mulched the bottom of it. I'm going to leave it there. It might come back, it might not. If it doesn't, I'll start more, it's okay. But that's how we use our zones primarily, is to figure out what we can plant that will get through the winter. If we have a perennial that can survive in our zone or in a colder zone, it's fine. We can plant it, we can leave it alone, we can let it do its thing unattended. For example, my echinacea or coneflower, I can plant that and not worry about it. I don't need to take special measures to mulch it. I don't need to put a sheet over it when we're going to have a freeze. It can handle what we do here. Another way that you might want to use your zones is to group plantings. So if I had a bunch of zone 9 and 10 plants that I wanted to grow here, if I planted them all in one area, then when we do have the cooler weather, 10 degrees would probably still knock them out. But when we do have the cooler weather, I can cover those. Those also might be the ones that we choose to put in pots. I do have a moringa in a pot. If you want to grow citrus in zone 8, you might want to put it in a pot, and that way you can bring those in. All right, so you'll want to figure out which zone you're in if you don't already know. A lot of times you can pull up just a zone map. If you put in USDA zone map, it'll come up, and then you can kind of try to find yourself on there. But if you're in one of those little spotty areas, if you put into any search engine USDA zone and then your zip code, it'll tell you where you are. There is a map online that you can look at, and you can zoom in really tight, which is how I found the Trinity River thing. And that is planthardiness.ars.usda.gov. I'm going to put a link in the description for you. I'm not going to expect you to remember that. Don't worry. You will use your zone with your frost dates, and I'm going to do a video about that, and you'll get that one next week. All you really need to know is that this tells you how cold it's going to get, so you know which of your plants for sure are not going to make it through the winter. And then you used your frost dates to figure out, okay, well, this plant is going to be done around November, December, depending on where you are, because it's going to get too cold for it. And you'll be able to use it for like, okay, well, I can't put this plant out until the end of March because it won't be warm enough for it yet. So it's different pieces that you have to kind of take and put together. Knowing the allowance that your plant has is a really big help. If it's not on your plant packet, then you can look it up online. Or if you have any local resources, if you have people in your area who have been growing a certain plant for a long time, then you can talk to them and they'll be able to tell you too. Because it is Observe and Interact Month, here's some things that I'm going to ask you to look for. My average annual low is 10, and we don't hit that very often, but we did have that hard freeze last February, which is either called snowpocalypse or snowvid, depending on who you ask. We got down to -1, which is not normal for here. And we were below our average annual for several days. So I marked all of those in my planner. I keep a simplistic bullet journal type planner for chores and for gardening. And just, I have my little, my bullet list, and then over to the side, when we have extremely hot or extremely cold or extremely wet or extremely dry, I just make a note on the side. So that is part of my Observe and Interact. I observed that we had those really low temperatures for an extended period of time, so I went back in and put them all in my calendar. AccuWeather will have a daily chart of all of your highs and lows. And then I'll use that to interact by checking Old Farmer's Almanac, who says that this February we probably will have another colder than usual event in February, a little bit later, but not quite as bad. Now, that's not 100%, that's not a guarantee, it's not a promise. It's something to keep in mind. I know that it happened before, I know which plants made it through, I know which plants had to be deep mulched, and I can use what I observed to interact this year. So today is going to be a two-part question. Question 1 is, what is your USDA growing zone? And if you're not in the US, what is your growing zone, or how do you determine what you can grow through the winter in your area? Part 2 is, did you already know your growing zone before you watched this video? And if so, did you understand how to use it? If you could, please answer those. Let's get a little interaction going. Let's get a little conversation going. If you've learned anything or this has helped you out, please go ahead and hit that thumb and subscribe if you don't mind. As promised, I will link you to the Permaculture Zones video up here. Alrighty? Later, y'all.